Hi, I'm Steve Ledoux, Town Manager here in Acton, and we're going to be discussing some of the warrant articles that you will see at Annual Town Meeting, which starts Monday, April 3rd at 7 p.m. in the auditorium at Acton Boxborough Regional High School. And with me right now are two petitioners who are going to speak to Articles 26, 27, and 28, which are non-binding resolutions that in essence deal with water and water quality in town. So with me is Kim Castons and Bob Sekula, and welcome and thank you
for joining us.
Thank you.
Maybe before we talk about the articles, you could say a little about what prompted you to do the petition and maybe a little about each one of your backgrounds.
Sure. Well, I'm Kim Castons, and I live on Pope Road. I've been here for 4.5 years with my family. And I'm a retired professor of Earth and Environmental Sciences from Columbia University's Lamont Dougherty Earth Science Lab. So water issues, sort of sustainability, all these things are close to my heart professionally. And I became aware of this issue since moving to the area, and it seemed like a place where my interests and expertise could overlap and be of use to my new community.
Okay, great.
I'm Bob Sekula. I live on Parkland Lane. I've been in Acton for 2.5 years, and I teach and do neuroscience research at Brandeis University. And I became interested in water because right next to us is a very large and beautiful body of water, public water resource, Nagog Pond. And I've had experience in long-range planning both at Northwestern, where I taught before I came to Brandeis, at Brandeis when I was an administrator, and also for the Concord Free Public Library when I lived in Concord for 25 years.
Okay, great. So Article 26 is a non-binding resolution that really asks the selectmen to undertake a water study. So why don't you guys talk a little about that?
Yeah. So what we discussed doing was, and let us know if this is okay with you, was I would sort of lay out the problems or the long-term problem and the immediate catalyst for why we should be paying attention to this right now. And then Bob would introduce the petitioners and then go through the articles one by one, saying why we think each one of them has a role in addressing the problem.
That's fine.
But
So,
Steve,
okay?
the three articles are very much of an integrated package.
Absolutely.
And so they all share the same, basically, same motivation. They're all addressing the same overall issue.
Correct. Okay, that sounds fine.
Okay. So I'm a earth science professor. I need slides. Could you bring up the slides? Let's think about the long-term problem, first of all. All of our water, 90% of the people in Acton get their water from town water. And that water comes from shallow water wells between 28 feet and 68 feet deep, which is quite shallow for water wells. They're all within the bounds of the town. And many of the most promising well sites have already been tapped, so that's part of our problem. So in the next slide, you can see that the population, this is a graph that shows the population of Acton growing over time from the 1950 census through the 2010 census. And for a long time, the population was low and stable, and then in the 50s, it began to grow very rapidly. And in the next slide, you can see that many of the important decisions about how Acton handles its water were made back when the town population was small and stable. So in 1884 was the passage of the state law that governs water distribution from the pond. In 1912 was the establishment of the Acton Water District. And then the population began to grow and grow and grow. And throughout that time, the solution was to drill more wells. But that approach is nearing the end of its useful lifetime because there's only certain geological and hydrologic settings where you can drill and hope to get enough water that it would be of use for a town water supply. So the next slide. In addition to population growth, the water quality is threatened by pollution, potentially from local spills. So the little triangles on the map are places where there's a well. And the gray areas surrounding them are the zone from which each of those wells shown by triangles draws. And as you can see, some of those recharge zones cross major highways, Route 2, 2A, and 27. And so there's threat from local spills, but there's also a threat from Superfund sites. The next slide shows a plume of 1,4-dioxane coming down from the W.R. Grace Superfund site, and plumes which are also coming up from the Nuclear Metals Superfund site to the southeast of us. Already, water from the Assabet wells has to be diluted to keep the dioxane below the Massachusetts drinking water guidelines. So the next slide shows that. So each bar is a measure of 1,4-dioxane in water from the South Acton water treatment plant. This data comes from the Acton Water District, and each bar shows the measurements on one date with the dates across the bottom. So the next slide, superimposed on this is 0.3 parts per billion, which is the Massachusetts guidelines for 1,4-dioxane in drinking water. And so by mixing water from different sources, the Acton Water District has been successfully keeping the South Acton water treatment plant water below this guideline, but it gets awfully close in some of those months, and that could potentially get to be harder and harder to do if the other plume arrives from the other Superfund site. Next slide. In addition, the New England climate change forecast includes more frequent droughts in the summer or fall, which is the part of the year when we're most stressed for water already. Next slide. So these problems have been growing for many, many years. Why is this on, why are we caring about this all of a sudden? Why is this on the warrant for the 2017 town meeting? The immediate catalyst was, as Bob mentioned, Nagog Pond, which is a beautiful body of water that sits at the border between Acton and Littleton. So Littleton, Acton, and Concord all have the rights to withdraw water for town use from this pond according to an 1884 law. Only Concord has exercised that right to date. Next slide. Concord is planning to build a much larger water treatment plant on the pond, which will greatly increase their ability to withdraw water from this pond. So the bottom graph shows Concord's withdrawal from this pond from 2012 to 2016, and the values wiggle around about 0.5 million gallons per day for years, and then there were some years of higher withdrawal, and then in recent years, at the right-hand side of the graph, there's been very low withdrawals by Concord from Nagog Pond. The green line superimposed on the chart is at 1.5 million gallons per day. So that is the rated capacity or the requested capacity for the new water treatment plant. And that capacity could be drawn 12 months a year rather than just in the summer. So this is a lot more water than they've been taking historically. And so the next slide shows why we're worried about this. So the map on the left shows that in the normal course of events with no dam and no water withdrawals, the water comes out of Nagog Pond, it flows down through Nagog Brook, joins Neshoba Brook, and crosses across the entire width of Acton before finally exiting across our eastern border and flowing into Concord. And as it goes across Acton, it would put water in our wetlands, it would recharge our aquifer. It passes right over the site of one of our well fields, which is at the intersection between routes 27 and 2A, and should contribute to the recharge of those wells, and then finally reaches Acton. And so if that water is not available to pass across Acton, there are many questions that are very hard to answer right now. So would additional withdrawals from Nagog Pond decrease water availability in Acton's well fields? Would additional withdrawals harm the ecosystems of the pond or of the downstream brooks? And if Concord makes a major investment and has this history of establishing this large amount of water each day, would Acton actually be able to access the Nagog Pond water under the 1884 law at a future date? And during the course of this year-long deliberation, it became clear that it was very difficult to answer these questions with the information in hand. So we began to realize that additional studies were needed. So that's what we wanted you to sort of lay out for the audience about the nature of the problem and why now. Do you have questions so far? Or?
No, well, not really. I will say I actually have 6 credits in geology, believe it or not.
Oh, do you?
Well, we can put you on the
Long time ago.
we can put you on the team then.
A long time ago. But I guess one thing I do know is that hydrology is very complicated,
It is,
and that's probably why you're proposing that
Yes.
study.
That's right, yeah.
Because some folks have said, oh, there's no correlation between Nagog Pond and the wells. You know, we kind of heard that through the site plan special permit process
Yes.
and all
Yeah.
that. So.
I don't think it's safe to say that. I don't
Yeah.
think it's a safe assumption.
Yeah.
So the geometry suggests that there's something to be worried about because the outflow of Nagog Pond crosses right across one of our well fields, but we can't say, you know, from what's known either that it will or that it won't. But there is a very good model put out by the USGS a few years back that covers the whole Assabet River Basin, and it uses the USGS standard flow mod model, which is the accepted model to use for that. And I spoke to the scientist, Leslie DeSimone, who lives locally, it turns out, who did that original study. And she says, you know, the model's available, it's been updated recently, you know, she's happy to answer questions about it. And so there's good science to build on to try to get answers to these questions.
Yeah.
So.
Steve, I'm glad you said what you just said. I think it's really important not only to do the study and get the information, but to overcome some of the misinformation that people have glommed onto, particularly during this hearing. There have been a number of instances where things should have been corrected, the statements should have been corrected, and for various reasons they weren't, and there was a lot of misinformation. So let me talk about who the people are who are behind this thing. Can I have the next slide? So there is a large group of people who are the primary drivers. I should emphasize that over the course of about 3 to 4 months when we were developing these 3 warrant articles, we got input from lots of other people, mostly from Acton, but people from neighboring towns as well, who are all interested parties. And we drew on a very diverse group of people with a very wide range of backgrounds. So let me just quickly go through what's on the slide. You can read faster than I can speak, so let me quickly go through this. So Kim has already introduced herself, and her expertise that she brings as an earth scientist is focused basically in this work on how water moves on the surface and how it moves under the surface. She's always reminding us that there's a lot that goes on unseen. It's not just the brooks and the rivers and so on that we have to worry about. Also, the plumes migrate under, and radioactivity moves underground. In addition, two of our group, Barry Rosen and Ron Beck, have long been associated with water issues in Acton. Ron is the chair of a committee that's advisory to the Board of Selectmen, and Barry is chair of a committee that's advisory to the Acton Water District, and we'll mention more about the Acton Water District in a few moments. Tara Friedrich is a longtime activist, sustainability activist, who is incredibly well informed about a wide range of issues. Carolyn Keeley is an environmental lawyer who, before moving to Acton, was chair of the Carlisle Conservation Commission. And I've already introduced myself. And both Carolyn and I live in North Acton, very close to the pond, which is one of the stimuli for our interests. So let me just say something about the 3 articles, and Steve, if it's all right, I'll talk about the 3 of them first as a package, and then I'll break them down and go one by one. I'll try to go quickly because there's a lot of information here. The 3 articles are a package. They're integrated. They're designed to reinforce one another and play off one another. At town meeting, I'm hoping we can present them first, at least describe them as a package, and then go on to discuss them individually. And of course, we have to have separate votes on each of them. But the articles are trying to attack a very complex problem. As you said, hydrology is complex. They're trying to attack a complex problem on multiple fronts concurrently. And the issue is, if we were to take these one at a time, it would be 30 years before we got done with all of the work that needs to be done. So that's why we're proposing 3 of them. So may I have the next slide? Here's Article 26. It proposes that the town, along with partners, particularly the Acton Water District, undertake a study systematic study of all of the issues concerning Acton's water supply, its resources, its needs going forward, and including the risks that Kim alluded to a moment ago. And drought is certainly one of them. It's particularly resonant with Acton residents right now because of what happened this past summer. So during the course of the Nagog Pond hearing, which is now concluded, both Acton town officials and the Acton Water District acknowledged that information is incomplete, in some cases woefully incomplete. And as I said a moment ago, one of my own personal concerns as a researcher is the fear that people get ideas or hold ideas that are wrong, that are not fact-based. And I would hope that one of the purposes, one of the outcomes of the study would be to overcome some of that thing. The last study of water resources in Acton was done in 2012. It was published in 2014, and it focused mainly on stormwater and sewage. It touched a little bit on water, but that was not the main focus. And if one looks at it today from the vantage point of today, you can see that it is very much, shall we say, in need of updating. The selectmen and the Acton Water District working together would develop the actual detailed scope and plan for the study that we have in mind. We've identified, we brainstormed a number of possible topics and issues that might be included in the study, but that's very much not up to Kim and me or our group, but it's up to the selectmen and the Acton Water District. So obviously we want to figure out what our situation is, what the prospects are going forward. And notice that one of the things we're talking about here is a 20-year study of our needs. Some people say it's not long enough, but I think that's enough of a bite for us to take at this point. The total cost of the various stages of the study spread out over multiple years is somewhere in the neighborhood of $150,000 to $175,000. We base that on our estimates of the various components, the 7 components of the study. I should say that if people think that that's a lot of money, and it is a lot of money, it's not something you find but underneath the cushions of your couch in a normal house. If people think that's a lot of money, I just want to point out that while we can estimate the cost of doing the study with some reasonable confidence, you cannot estimate the cost of not doing anything. And we've seen horrible examples in recent years in communities in this country where all of a sudden the water problem emerged that they hadn't anticipated, or even worse, they had made decisions based on incomplete or faulty information, and then the costs escalate dramatically, well beyond what could have been saved by doing the study properly. By the way, I should tell you that the Acton Water District is an enthusiastic supporter of all 3 of our articles, including this one, and they are eager. We met with the commissioners last week. The commissioners are eager to play a significant role in the study and have talked about, and I think they understand what the issues are, have talked about making a significant contribution to the costs of the study so that they can have a seat, as they put it, a seat at the table, which I would very much welcome. Can I have the next slide? So this is Article 27, and it encourages a conversation, a friendly conversation, dialogue among various stakeholders, including the Acton Water District, Littleton, Concord, and of course our own town officials. And the conversation is, as we foresee it, is to be focused on Nagog Pond. As Kim alluded to a moment ago, we have this wonderful, pristine water supply sitting right there between Acton and Concord, and yet
Acton and Littleton.
I'm sorry, Acton and Littleton. Sorry, that's because I'm a former Concord resident, as is Steve. And only at the moment only Concord can use it, and that's because in 1884, as Kim mentioned, when Concord's population was more than 3 times that of Littleton's, Concord was given the right by the state to draw water from Nagog Pond, with the proviso, and apparently people in Concord seem to forget this, with the proviso in Section 10 of the Act, that should Acton and or Littleton need to draw water from Nagog Pond, we would have priority rights. I'm not saying that if we try to exercise those rights or we succeed in exercising those rights that we shut out Concord. That doesn't seem reasonable to me personally. But I do think there ought to be a conversation about revisiting this thing. And that conversation should take place in a friendly negotiation to try to set up some equitable sharing of this wonderful resource that we have at our doorstep, particularly given the threats and issues that Kim spelled out so beautifully a few moments ago. And we're basically talking about a regionalization, and the state one of the nice things about Massachusetts is it has enormous numbers of small towns and cities. It has close to 400 towns and cities put together. And one of the things the state has been doing in recent years is, and I think it's a very sensible move, is to encourage regionalization. So in our own community, we have wonderful examples of the effectiveness of this regionalization. The Acton Boxborough Regional High School, Regional School District, excuse me, and we also have the Minuteman Library System, which is just a boon to all the communities that take part in it. And so I see this conversation promoting that kind of regionalization. And so I would hope that whatever comes out of the study, this is quite independent of that, I would hope that Concord, Littleton, Acton, and the Acton Water District would sit and have a friendly, fair discussion about the equitable sharing of that water. Now, sometimes when you engage in a friendly conversation with anybody or a negotiation, it's useful that both parties start at roughly the same place, that is, in terms of their power. You don't want to negotiate with somebody who is 100 feet tall and you're way down here. And so one of the aims of the next article that I'll describe, Article 28, is to try to level the playing field a little bit, to give Acton a little bit more support in its discussions with Concord. I'm loath to call Article 28 a stick, but some people have characterized it as that. It's something you can put in your back pocket in these negotiations, in these friendly discussions, and it'll be it could be in Concord's mind that, you know, if it doesn't negotiate in good faith, that there is an alternative. So can I have the next slide, please? So here's Article 28. This is an article that was stimulated by my conversation with Representative Corey Atkins. And I asked Corey, what would we have to do for Acton to actually draw to draw on the promise that the legislature made in 1884, giving us priority rights? And Corey said, well, there has to be a vote at town meeting to ask the legislature, petition the legislature. And so that's what this is. That's what this is intended to do. It's ask the Board of Selectmen to petition the legislature to initiate the process. You might say, well, why do that now? Why not wait until we actually need it? And the answer is very simple. The history of negotiations around these kinds of water issues, legislative decrees about water, suggest that it would take years, if not decades, for the water to become actually available to Acton. Now, I won't go into all the history of this, but it is quite an interesting battle, for instance, between Lincoln and Concord about a different body of water that sits in Lincoln. Now, let me just say one thing in closing. If we are really certain, if we could be certain, 100% certain, that Acton would never, ever, ever need that to draw on water from Nagog Pond, or if we could be absolutely certain, Steve, that our own current water resources would always be sufficient for the next N years, 20, 30, 50 years, then these three articles are totally unnecessary. However, if you have any doubts about either of those things, that whether we're going to need the water from ever need the water from Nagog, or we're ever going to need to find other water resources that are not threatened within our own boundaries, then these articles are certainly, I personally think, critical. Can I have the next slide?
I think we're.
No? Yeah.
I think we're. Okay.
For
yeah,
more information, go to this website, Water for Acton, where 4 is the numeral 4, .wordpress.com. That's waterforacton.wordpress.com.
Excellent. Excellent. So just as an aside, I guess, I got an email from the town administrator in Littleton. I guess they've got a couple petition articles, very similar to these.
Very similar, Steve. They say that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Yes, our articles 27 and 28 are on the town meeting warrant for Littleton, which meets on, I think it's May 1st.
It's in May, I know that.
And they have done a couple of changes. They've renumbered R2 from 27 and 28 to 24 and 25. You know, it's very, very, very subtle. And of course, they've interchanged the words Acton and Littleton. Brilliant. But you know, that comes back to the point I made at the beginning. We have been drawing on not just input from people in Acton, although Lord knows we have a lot of talented and committed people in our own town, but we've also been hearing from people in other towns, including from Littleton, and we recognize that as far as we're concerned, this is a regional problem. Water does not recognize town boundaries. Whatever boundaries we make, it goes its own way, and I think that it would be useful for everybody to recognize that and address the problem from a more regional perspective.
Absolutely. And you know, plus with the selectmen just finishing up the site plan special permit, they do have some language there trying to encourage dialogue amongst the three towns too. So
that was
we were happy to see that.
Good to hear it. Yes.
Yeah. So hopefully that will take place. Decision was signed today, so appeal process is now started. So at any rate, well, I think it's been very educational, and I think this will. You know, it's funny because even though they're non-binding resolutions, I never like to make predictions about town meeting, but I think this will probably have some of the most debate and discussion. I think at town meeting, to be my sense.
I have to say that I think that process is very valuable. That just raising the awareness of people throughout the town of water issues, the fact that water is not out there in infinite supply, that there's a lot of complicated things that have to happen before the water can come out of the faucet when you turn the faucet. Absolutely. All of those good things are very important from the point of view of building the public understanding that can lead to wise decisions. So that's all good.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, I appreciate you guys coming on the show.
Thank you.
You know, once again, we've been talking about Articles 26, 27, and 28 at the annual town meeting. For the viewers, these items will probably be taken up on the second night, Tuesday night of town meeting, which is at the auditorium at the Acton-Boxborough Regional High School. So once again, I'd like to thank you all for being on the show, and we'll see you at town meeting next week.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you.